Today I'm going to be showing you guys how I replicated the song Left and Right from Charlie Puth and Jungkook from BTS. We're going to be going over how to get a super distorted sort of modern take on an indie pop track with crunchy guitars and a very corroded high end. A lot of interesting stuff on the mix end here. But before we jump into any of that, let me introduce myself. Hi, my name is Seth. I work as a song completion producer for guitar-based pop artists. I do one of these videos every Thursday to show people how to do it at home. So if you see the way that I approach stuff and you think that we would be a good fit for a project, check out the top link in my description. All right, now on to the track. So the first thing we're going to look at are these guys. So as you can see, I didn't take one take of me playing this normally, even though I did it multiple times. Because in my opinion, one of the most interesting points of Charlie Puth's production style is the fact that he uses a lot of guitars in his songs, but he doesn't actually play guitar. He's even said it in interviews for songs like Attention. What he'll do is he'll record himself playing one note at a time on the guitar, and then he'll edit them to whatever he wants the guitar to sound like in the DAW. And you can hear that in Left and Right. Like it almost acts more as a synthesizer than a guitar. Like it's very synthetically consistent. In terms of actual signal chain, I'm using the Neural DSP Corey Wong plugin. I just tweaked the default setting a little bit. After that, I used some EQ to sort of cut out a lot of the low end, specifically this 170 hump. In the original track, when I was listening to it, there's really not a lot of body in the guitars themselves. So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't accidentally adding some woofiness to them. And then I normally like to low pass my guitars as well. But on this track, I actually low pass them a lot more than I normally would. As you can see, it's like 4K. Because again, with this track, there's not a lot of high end in the final mix. So if you can get your individual elements to sound closer to that on their own, it'll make the mixing side a little bit easier. And then I used L1 to sort of level it out. The volume was a little bit lower than I normally would. If I was doing this correctly, I would probably gain stage it so I wouldn't have it this low. But as you can see, it's just leveling out the performance from a volume standpoint. So you can see it really hits here on the last chord of the progression. So as you can see, it hits the hardest here on the first chords of the progression, and then it eases up here on the latter half. See like 6 dB, and then less than that, 6 dB. So it really levels out the performance. Because this is a song I'm producing, everything is double tracked. And then on this bus where I have both of the guitars going, this is where I'm doing a lot of that sort of high-end corrosion, specifically for these guitars. So if I turn this off, like you can hear how strong that pick attack. So the first thing I did was I threw on Kramer tape, IPS speed 7.5, really distorted it. You can hear it not only dulled up the high end a lot, but it brought up a lot of the harmonic. And then it looks like this is where I did a lot of the gain staging makeup after the fact. And that tape saturation wasn't enough to get all of the pick attack out. And it was adding sort of a low end woofiness. So I threw Soothe on and it's going pretty hard right now. But it just kind of levels it out a bit, doing a little bit more EQ work. And then just to dynamically control that low end frequency, I have a C4 going right now. You can really see it going on that last chord of the phrase. It just pulls everything together. And then I don't know if they did this on the original track, but what I noticed was when we went to the chorus, I wasn't really getting as much beef as I wanted from the guitars. So what I did was I duplicated those tracks and recorded 2 other parts, which are just higher octaves. As you can see, I'm duplicating the same note over and over again like I did with the others. They're going into the same bus. So all together, these guys sound a lot thicker. I'm actually really happy with how these guys turned out. Next thing I did was the bass. I just used my normal P bass for this one. Again, I've been getting a lot of use out of this Corey Wong Neural DSP plugin. I used the P bass preset that they have, tweaked it a little bit. I think I turned up the compression, the tube saturation, and the high pass a little bit. I really love using the Chris Lord Algae bass plugin because it's a really handy way to sort of add all of the characteristics of a bass that you normally need from like a finished mixed bass. And it's all in one plugin. So for the bass, there's subs, lows, and uppers. I think lowers are more of like the 150 range. Pulled out some of the cutting frequencies, used the compression to just push it a tiny bit. I wanted this bass to be really consistent and leveled out. Add a little bit of sub-harmonic saturation, some distortion, and then a little bit of stereo spread. So without it, with. To me, it just makes feel like more of a complete bass. And then I wanted to level it out a little bit more. So I used Picky Bass preset on the Tube STA from Arturia. That really helped level out the bass volume a lot. And then as one last little bit of volume control, I'm using this clean and dynamic preset on Bass Rider Live. I absolutely love this plugin. And then I just did a little bit of EQ work here. For this bass tone, I actually wanted to do more of a classical technique of EQing a bass and a kick drum together. So this is a mirror EQ curve. And essentially what you do is you go to your kick drum, you find out what the sort of fundamental frequency is for that specific drum. And then you go back to your bass and you subtract that fundamental frequency from the kick with an E cut. And it just makes sure that the space is a little bit cleaner. I know I normally use dynamic Q stuff with Soothe, but this is how they did it before they had stuff like Soothe. We then have a couple of Juno pads. They're just there subtly when the chorus hits. So we have this one here. Which is this Callisto pad preset in Anna 2, really bandpassed it. I kind of only wanted this sort of upper mid-range from it, and then some wider from Infected Mushroom, going into my normal ROM reverb on Ascend. And then we have this pad here, which is from Splice's Astra synth on the Synth Legend preset. I think I adjusted the attack on this guy here, just because normally the preset is a little more, like it has more of a general fade in, and I just wanted it to be a harsh stab. Then some EQ, and these guys are just sort of filling in the space that the guitars and the bass aren't filling up. This is a really sparse track harmonically. Like, apart from the drums, we just have guitars and bass. And while the guitars and the bass do a really great job of filling out the space for how minimal they are, they do need a little bit of help when you're trying to add that air or that lift when the chorus hit, or adding a little bit of meat behind that chord progression. These guys are awesome because they're very subtle and they're not even super audible. Moving on to that, we have the hi-hat, which are just being destroyed right now. I wanted to add a compressor here just to sort of level out that stick action, because I was noticing they were kind of inconsistent. So if I turn it off and then I turn on the compressor, it just brought that initial hit and the softer hit a little bit closer together. Used a little bit of Mo TT on the drum exciter on like 26% just to sort of brighten it up a bit. And then I wanted to bring back that initial transient. So I used a transient shaper to bring up the attack and lower the sustain. So all together, before, after. I far preferred that as a hi-hat sound. So the last two things we have are the kick and the snare. And a thing to note real quick is all of these other instruments that I've shown you, the hi-hat synths, the bass, the guitars, those are all going into one giant group that have two sidechain compressors, one for the kick and one for the snare, and then a little bit more EQ shaping because the low mids were a little bit muddy. But if I take these guys and mute them, you'll see. Looks like we're doing about 6 dB of gain reduction whenever the kick or the snare hit. And it just makes overall beat so much cleaner because these kick and snare samples are pretty heavy in the low end. So first, let's look at the kick. This is the BBL kick _ Anna. I'm assuming this is from the Bedroom Pop line on Splice, going into some virtual tape. Little bit of max bass, more like a lot of max bass, some EQ, and then some transient shaping to shorten that tail. It's very bass, 4 on the floor. Technically, it's not even 4 on the floor. It's 4 on the half note. It's more like half note on the floor. And then the snare is this DP snare. I don't remember where that came from. Using some MoTT to clean up the signal. Really wanted to accentuate the attack because it wasn't really there in the original sample. A lot of distortion here from this kilohertz distortion bundle. I actually really love these plugins because they're really simple one-use effect. And then a little bit of EQ shaping after. So without, with. It just gives it a little bit more sizzle. And then for the mastering chain, I had to do a pretty heavy high-end cut because left and right sound so dark as a mix. I'm completely flabbergasted that that's the mixing direction they went, but it's actually kind of cool because it's very unique. But yeah, normal high pass on the master, little bit of a mid-range cut, and then an insane high-end cut. I would never do anything like this unless it was a song like this where it was being called for. Using some slate glue, doing like 1 dB of gain reduction whenever the kick hits really. Some linear phase multiband from Waves on the multi-electro mastering preset to sort of even out the tonal characteristics of it. And then a lot of distortion here on the mid-range. And then I'm using FabFilter Saturn. I'm distorting a lot in this mid-range area and then using the level to sort of balance out that volume difference. And then I don't really have a mastering limiter going right now. I'm just using L1 as example. So that's everything. So let me show you what the full beat sounds like. Super curious to see in the comments how close you guys think I got. Also, if you see anything that you would do differently. Hit those buttons below. You already know how it works. Again, I do one of these every Thursday, so if this is the kind of content that you would find helpful, I'd really appreciate the sub. Also, if you liked this, check out the video I did last week where I showed you how to sound like the band Camino. All right, peace out, guys.